The Spanish Civil War was a terrible conflict. It began in July 1936 and ended in April 1939. This war, really tore the country of Spain apart. It set neighbors against neighbors and, even more painfully, brothers against brothers. Spain had become a republic in 1931, which meant it no longer had a king. The new government tried to make many changes, aiming to modernize Spain. It gave more rights to workers and women, and also reduced the power of the Catholic Church and the army. These changes, as you can imagine, were very controversial and created deep divisions within Spanish society, setting the stage for a violent confrontation that would soon engulf the entire nation. Two main groups fought in the war. One side was the Republicans, who supported the democratically elected government. This group was a mix of many different people. It included socialists, communists, and anarchists, as well as liberals who simply wanted to keep Spain a republic. They were united by their desire to stop the other side, and believed they were fighting for freedom and progress against old oppressive forces. The Republican side was also known as the Loyalists, because they were loyal to the legal government of Spain. Their struggle was seen by many as a defense of democracy itself. The other side was the Nationalists. This group was led by an army general named Francisco Franco. The Nationalists were a coalition of right-wing groups. They included monarchists, who wanted to bring back the king, and also fascists, known as the Falange. The Catholic Church and most of the Spanish army supported the Nationalists. They were afraid of the changes the Republic was making and wanted a more traditional and authoritarian Spain. They believed they were saving the country from communism and chaos, fighting for God and national unity against what they saw as a foreign-influenced, godless government. The war started with a military uprising. On July 17, 1936, a group of army generals tried to seize control of the country. General Franco was one of their leaders. The coup failed to take over the whole country quickly. It succeeded in some areas but was defeated in others, like the major cities of Madrid and Barcelona. This partial failure split Spain in two. One part was controlled by the Republicans and the other by the Nationalists. This division marked the beginning of a long and bloody civil war. The initial uprising transformed into a full-scale conflict that would last for nearly 3 years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Fascism was a very important idea in this war. Fascism is a political system led by a powerful dictator who has total control. In a fascist state, the government is more important than the individual person. There is no democracy, and no one is allowed to disagree with the leader. Fascist governments are strongly nationalistic and often militaristic. They believe in using force to achieve their goals. In Spain, the Falange party was a fascist group. General Franco and the Nationalists adopted many fascist ideas. They wanted to create a strong, centralized state under one leader, which was the opposite of the Republic's democratic ideals. The Spanish Civil War was more than just a Spanish fight. It became a battleground for the great ideas clashing in Europe. Two other fascist leaders in Europe were watching Spain closely. Adolf Hitler in Germany and Benito Mussolini in Italy were both fascists. They saw General Franco as an ally and decided to help the Nationalists. Mussolini sent tens of thousands of Italian soldiers who were called volunteers. Hitler sent his powerful air force, the Condor Legion. Their planes and weapons gave the Nationalists a huge advantage. They used the war to test their new military tactics, like the terror bombing of cities. Many people around the world supported the Republicans. They saw the war as a fight against the spread of fascism. They were afraid that if fascism won in Spain, it would soon threaten their own countries. Thousands of men and women traveled to Spain to help the Republic. They came from places like the United States, Britain, and France. They formed groups called the International Brigades. These were volunteer soldiers who believed they were fighting for freedom and democracy. They were writers, artists, workers, and students. Their bravery showed how much the world cared about Spain's struggle for its future. Even governments got involved, though often secretly. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, was the main country that helped the Republic. It sent weapons, tanks, and military advisors. However, this help came at a high price. The Soviet Union gained a lot of influence over the Republican government. Meanwhile, other democracies like Britain and France declared a policy of non-intervention. They refused to sell weapons to either side. They hoped this would stop the war from spreading. In reality, this policy hurt the Republic far more than the Nationalists, who were receiving massive support from Germany and Italy without any restrictions. Life during the Spanish Civil War was incredibly difficult for ordinary people. The war brought constant fear and uncertainty into every home. Cities were bombed from the air for the first time in history. The bombing of Guernica by German planes in 1937 became a famous symbol of this new type of brutal warfare against civilians. People in cities had to hide in shelters during air raids. Sirens would wail, sending families rushing for safety underground. Daily life was a struggle for survival. The simple act of going to the market or sending children to school was filled with danger, and the psychological toll of living under constant threat was immense. Food became scarce in many parts of Spain, especially in the Republican-held areas. The Nationalists controlled most of the country's farmland. This led to severe food shortages in the cities. People had to stand in long lines for hours to get a small ration of bread or oil. Hunger was a constant problem. Many people were malnourished, and children suffered the most. Families had to be creative to find enough to eat. They ate whatever they could find, sometimes things they would never have considered food before the war. The lack of food weakened the population and made them more vulnerable to disease. The war created a climate of deep suspicion and hatred. In both the Nationalist and Republican zones, people suspected of supporting the other side were persecuted. These campaigns of terror were known as the White Terror in the Nationalist zone and the Red Terror in the Republican zone. People were arrested, imprisoned, and often executed without a fair trial. A neighbor could denounce you, and you could disappear overnight. This political violence created a terrible atmosphere of fear. People were afraid to speak their minds or trust anyone outside their immediate family, knowing that a wrong word could lead to death. Millions of people were forced to leave their homes. They became refugees in their own country, fleeing the fighting and seeking safety in other towns. As the Nationalist armies advanced, huge columns of civilians would flee on foot, carrying only what they could. At the end of the war, hundreds of thousands of Republican supporters crossed the border into France to escape Franco's forces. They were placed in harsh refugee camps. Families were torn apart, and many never saw their homes or loved ones again. The displacement of so many people was one of the great tragedies of the war, creating wounds that would last for generations. The war officially ended on April 1st, 1939. General Franco announced the victory of his nationalist forces. The Second Spanish Republic was destroyed. Franco established a dictatorship that would rule Spain for the next 36 years. He became the absolute ruler, known as El Caudillo, which means the leader. All political parties were banned, except for his own. The press was censored, and freedoms were taken away. Spain was cut off from much of the world. The victory of the Nationalists meant the end of democracy in Spain for a very long time, ushering in an era of severe political and social repression. The result of the war was devastating for Spain. It is estimated that around 500,000 people died in the conflict. Many more died from hunger and disease. After the war ended, the repression continued. Franco's regime executed tens of thousands of its former political opponents. Many others were sent to prisons or forced labor camps. The country was in ruins. Cities had been bombed, and the economy was shattered. It took Spain decades to recover from the physical destruction and the economic hardship that the war had caused. The human cost was immense, leaving a deep scar on the nation's soul. The Spanish Civil War is still very important today. It is often called a dress rehearsal for World War II. The war in Spain was the first major military clash between fascism and its opponents. Germany and Italy were able to test the weapons and tactics they would later use in World War II. The failure of democratic nations like Britain and France to stand up to fascism in Spain encouraged Hitler to become even more aggressive. Just 5 months after the Spanish Civil War ended, Hitler invaded Poland, and World War II began. The events in Spain provided a clear warning of the larger global conflict that was about to unfold. Today, Spain is a modern democracy, but the memory of the Civil War has not disappeared. For many years under Franco, it was forbidden to even talk about the war openly. Now, Spaniards are working to understand this difficult part of their history. They are uncovering mass graves of victims from the war and Franco's regime. There are still debates about how to remember the conflict and its victims. The war serves as a powerful reminder of how easily a country can be torn apart by political division. It teaches us about the terrible price of civil war and the importance of defending freedom and democracy.